The day I pulled a dead trout out of the lake, the water smelled like bleach. The same lake where I taught my son to fish, where my father's ashes were scattered. And when the HOA president smiled from across the dock, I knew this wasn't nature. This was war. My name's Daniel Harper, 45, former environmental engineer. I'd spent half my life cleaning up after greedy corporations that treated rivers like trash cans. When my father passed away, he left me this quiet house by Willow Creek Lake, half the lake legally mine written on the deed itself. All I wanted was peace. Mornings on the dock, coffee in one hand, fishing rod in the other, but peace and homeowners associations don't mix. The Willow Creek HOA was run by Linda McCarthy, a woman who treated the neighborhood like her personal kingdom. If your lawn was too long, fine. Mailbox the wrong color, fine. And if she didn't like your attitude, she'd find something to fine you for. At first, I ignored her, but then came the notice that crossed the line. Unauthorized private dock construction. $250 fine per day. I laughed when I read it. That dock's been standing since 1989. My father built it with his own hands, so I walked down to the lake and found Linda there herself, clipboard in hand, heels sinking in the mud. "Good morning, Mr. Harper," she said sweetly. "Your dock's in violation of community policy." I pointed at the wooden sign that read "Private Property, Harper Lake Access." "This half belongs to me." "Check the county records," she smiled wider. "Oh, we'll check. But until then, fines still apply. Rules are rules." That fake smile stayed burned in my head for days. 2 weeks later, something changed. The water had a strange shimmer, like oil floating on the surface. The air around it stung my nose. When I bent down and dipped my hand in, the smell hit me hard. Chlorine and something bitter chemical. I grabbed my old field test kit from the garage. Within minutes, I had the answer. Chlorine levels 30 times higher than normal. Traces of herbicide. Enough to kill fish, frogs, and anything else alive. By the next morning, the proof floated right to my dock. 3 dead trout, 1 bloated duck. I followed the runoff upstream. The path led straight to the HOA's maintenance pump house. They'd poisoned the lake, my lake, just to stop me from fishing. That evening, I walked straight into the HOA board meeting. Linda was mid-sentence about community unity when she saw me. "Mr. Harper," she said tightly, "you're not on the agenda." "You dumped chemicals into the lake," I said, holding up a jar of cloudy water. "I tested it. Industrial-grade cleaner. The same kind stored behind your pump house." The room went silent. Her expression didn't change. "Mr. Harper, please don't spread rumors," she said smoothly. "Our maintenance team uses approved treatments for common areas." "You mean poison?" She chuckled lightly. "You don't own that lake, Mr. Harper. That's community property. You should be grateful we maintain it." A few people laughed. I didn't. "You'll regret this," I told her quietly, setting the jar on the table before walking out. I'd faced oil execs, toxic waste managers, even government inspectors, but something about Linda's smug confidence made me colder than any of them. That night, I went through my father's old desk. Inside a dusty folder were the original Willow Creek development blueprints, the map before the HOA was even formed. And then I saw it. A thin blue line marked water main intake, running straight through my half of the lake. I traced it with my finger. That pipe fed the HOA's entire water system. Every sink, shower, and faucet in the neighborhood. They'd poisoned the very water their families drank. I leaned back, staring at the blueprint. "You just poisoned your own lifeline," I whispered. By morning, my anger turned methodical. I bought motion-activated cameras, testing sensors, and a waterproof recorder. Installed them all around the intake point and near their maintenance shed. If they dumped again, I'd have undeniable proof. 2 days later, the cameras caught exactly that. 2 HOA workers in reflective vests rolling a barrel marked algae, hazardous. They poured it straight into the runoff pipe leading to the lake. I downloaded the footage, labeled it, and made 3 copies. 1 for me, 1 for the county, and 1 for insurance. A new notice arrived that week. Unauthorized surveillance equipment installed. Remove immediately or face legal action. They'd spotted one of my cameras, then came a community email. Certain residents are spreading false environmental rumors. Please ignore any misinformation. Linda was panicking, trying to control the narrative. That meant she knew she'd done something wrong. I didn't respond. I didn't need to, because that same night the lake cameras caught something else, their pump system clogging with chemical foam. By morning, half the neighborhood was complaining about foul-smelling tap water. Brown metallic taste, sudsy texture. The HOA blamed seasonal algae bloom. But I knew the truth. They poisoned my peace, and now they were choking on it. I called an old friend, Tom Reyes, former EPA investigator. Sent him the photos, video, and test results. He called back 20 minutes later. Jesus, Dan, this is criminal. You sure this came from their pump? Positive, I said. You'll want to bring your hazmat guys for this one. He sighed. You realize once I file this, they're done, right? That's the point. That night I stood at the edge of the lake again. The moon reflected off the still poisoned surface. I remembered my father's words. A lake's a living thing, son. You poison the water, you poison yourself. He'd been right. Linda thought she could control everything. She forgot. Water flows both ways. 2 days later, a White County truck pulled up. A man in a reflective vest stepped out. Environmental inspector stenciled on the door. He took one sample from the far edge of the lake, smiled politely, and said, "Don't worry, Mr. Harper. Probably just fertilizer runoff. Happens all the time." He left in less than 15 minutes. No testing near the pump, no questions about the barrels, nothing. That night I drove into town and saw him. Same inspector, sitting at the steakhouse, laughing with Linda McCarthy over wine. I took a photo from my truck window. Proof. They thought they could bury this, but they forgot who I used to be. I didn't just test water for a living. I built the systems that caught people like them. For the next week, I stayed silent. No calls, no arguments, no reports. I even waved to Linda when she passed by in her Lexus, pretending everything was fine. Behind the scenes, though, I was collecting data. My water sensors sent hourly readings to a cloud drive. Chlorine and pesticide levels fluctuated every time the HOA ran their maintenance pumps. Every single time. I graphed it, time-stamped it, labeled it. A perfect pattern of pollution. Meanwhile, I set up another test. A control tank. One filled with clean water from a nearby creek, another with samples from the lake. Within 48 hours, fish in the lake sample floated belly up. The control fish swam fine. Proof undeniable. I sent the data packet to Tom Reyes at the EPA with one message. If they deny it now, I'll bury them in science. By the weekend, the HOA water lines started failing. Residents complained of brown, foul-smelling tap water. Kids broke out in rashes. The HOA group chat, which they forgot I could still read, exploded with panic. Linda tried to calm them. It's a temporary algae bloom, nothing to worry about. Avoid drinking tap water until Monday. Monday came and nothing improved. That same night I saw Linda standing on her porch, phone pressed to her ear, pacing fast. Her voice echoed across the water. Just fix it. I don't care what it costs, we can't let this go public. I smiled in the dark. Too late. 3 mornings later, 3 black SUVs rolled into Willow Creek. EPA field agents. I recognized the equipment instantly. Hazmat suits, pumps, containers. Tom stepped out, sunglasses on, shaking his head with a small grin. You weren't kidding, Dan. I told you. They're poisoning themselves. Linda stormed out of her house, her perfect suburban mask cracking. Excuse me! What is this? You can't just walk onto community property. Tom flashed his badge. Ma'am, we can. And we are. Her voice faltered. There's been some sort of misunderstanding. Sure, he said. We'll clear it up real quick. By noon, they'd pulled samples from the intake pipe, the lake bed, and the runoff drain. Results came in fast. Industrial chlorine, herbicide, and algicide residues, now all at illegal levels. Linda tried to claim they were standard treatments, but the labels from the dumped barrels told another story. EPA sealed off the pump house. The HOA's water system was officially shut down. By that evening, the neighborhood descended into chaos. No running water, no showers, no functioning toilets. Bottled water shipments ran out within hours. People who once laughed at me were now begging for answers. I sat on my dock, fishing rod in hand, watching the reflection of emergency trucks on the lake surface. For the first time in weeks, I felt the faintest breeze of peace. Linda showed up around sunset, furious, sweating, her makeup streaked. You did this, she yelled. You sabotaged the pumps. I looked at her calmly. You poisoned my lake. You have no proof, she spat. I turned the camera on my phone and showed her the footage. Her workers dumping barrels, the timestamps, the labels. Her face went pale. "You'll go to prison for this," I said quietly. "And I'll be right there to watch." The next morning, Linda called an emergency HOA meeting at the community center. Only a dozen people showed up. The rest were too angry or too scared. I went too, sitting in the back row. Linda stood at the front, trying to sound composed. "Everyone, this has been blown out of proportion. The EPA found minor contamination, but we're handling it internally." Tom entered mid-sentence, holding a folder. "Handling it internally? You mean the felony-level pollution you tried to hide?" Gasps filled the room. Linda froze. He dropped the folder on the table. Lab results, signed affidavits, photographs. "The water's unfit for human consumption. The HOA board authorized the chemical use without permits. That's criminal negligence." One of the residents shouted, "My kids got sick because of you." Linda tried to speak, but the shouting drowned her out. I stood quietly, walking to the front. "You see," I said, "you thought you could bully a man who just wanted peace. But peace doesn't mean weak. It means patient." Linda glared at me, trembling. "You'll regret this, Harper." "Already did," I said. "That's why I called them." Over the next week, everything unraveled. EPA fines, state environmental charges, residents demanding refunds, resignations, and answers. Half the HOA board quit overnight. Linda tried to shift blame to her maintenance staff, but the emails, the authorizations all had her signature. News vans showed up. The headline read, "Suburban HOA accused of poisoning lake and water supply." The footage from my cameras aired across local channels. Linda's smiling face, caught on tape from previous meetings, played next to scenes of dead fish and drained water lines. Poetic justice. One night I walked down to the water again. The lake was beginning to heal, slow but alive. New fish. Fresh water flowing from the upstream creeks I'd redirected. The stars reflected clearly again. My phone buzzed. A message from Tom. "Charges filed. She's done. We'll need you as a witness." I smiled faintly and typed back, "Wouldn't miss it." Then I sat there in silence, remembering the first day I'd returned here. My father's voice echoed in my head. "You poison the water, you poison yourself." And now Linda McCarthy was about to learn exactly what that meant. One morning I found an envelope taped to my mailbox. Cease and desist. It accused me of defamation, trespassing, and unauthorized surveillance. I laughed. Trespassing on my own property? Defamation? When the EPA had already confirmed the pollution? Classic Linda. When you can't win, bury the truth under paperwork. Still, I knew what she was doing. She wanted to stall. If she could drag me into a civil court mess, maybe she'd find a loophole, or make me look like a vengeful old man instead of a whistleblower. I wasn't going to let that happen. So I called an old friend, attorney Sarah Vaughn, environmental litigator. We'd worked together back in my water inspection days. When she heard the story, she chuckled. "Daniel, you always did know how to stir up a hornet's nest." "Not this time," I said. "They poisoned the lake and themselves." She paused. "Then let's make sure they drown in the paperwork they love so much." For the next 2 weeks, Sarah and I compiled everything. Sensor logs, EPA findings, photographs, timestamps, even the HOA meeting minutes where Linda approved chemical treatments. She filed a countersuit. Environmental destruction, negligence, and retaliation. The moment the papers hit Linda's desk, she cracked. She called me that evening. Her voice was trembling, but still proud. "You don't know what you're doing, Harper. You'll ruin the entire community." "No," I said, "you already did. I'm just cleaning up your mess." Then I hung up. By now, the residents had turned against the HOA. Their lawns were brown, their pools empty, and their kids were drinking bottled water from gas stations. Flyers started appearing around the neighborhood. "Remove the board. Save our homes." People who once voted for Linda now stood outside her house with protest signs. Every night her lights stayed off. Her perfect little empire was crumbling. I stayed quiet. Didn't attend meetings. Didn't post online. Didn't take interviews. Just watched. Because sometimes silence makes the loudest noise. Then out of nowhere, things got worse. At 2:47 a.m., flashing red and blue lights painted my living room walls. I opened the door to find 2 county sheriffs. "Mr. Harper, we've had a report of illegal chemical storage on your property." I raised an eyebrow. "Come on in." Behind my shed, they found 3 rusted barrels, identical to the ones the HOA used. except these had been planted there. The soil was freshly dug, and there were boot prints, not mine. I smiled grimly. Linda's last play make me the villain. The deputies looked uneasy. Sir, we'll need to take these as evidence. Take them, I said. And take the cameras too. Because I had 3 security cameras around that shed and they'd caught everything. The next day, Sarah sent the footage to the police chief and local news. It showed 2 men in the middle of the night unloading barrels from a white HOA maintenance truck. Game over. The courtroom smelled like old paper and fear. Linda sat across the aisle, dressed in her signature pearl-white blazer, pretending to be calm. Behind her, the remaining HOA board looked drained and scared. The judge entered, flipping through pages. Ms. McCarthy, it appears your association not only violated environmental law but attempted to frame Mr. Harper. Care to explain? Linda stammered. That footage is edited. The judge cut her off. The footage was authenticated by the sheriff's department. The silence that followed was heavy enough to crush her reputation entirely. Sarah rose smoothly. Your Honor, our evidence shows deliberate pollution, illegal dumping, and retaliation against a private landowner. We request full damages, the dissolution of the Willow Creek HOA board, and transfer of maintenance rights to the county. The judge leaned back, eyeing Linda. Ms. McCarthy, I suggest you retain criminal counsel. Gasps rippled through the courtroom. By the end of the week, the HOA was officially suspended. Linda was charged with environmental endangerment, evidence tampering, and conspiracy. The rest of the board scrambled to save themselves, signing plea deals and handing over emails. The local paper's headline read, HOA president faces prison for poisoning community water supply. It went viral. News channels ran my interview for days, not as a hero story, but as a warning. Corporate greed and small-town corruption can destroy everything, even the water beneath your feet. A month later, the county commissioner visited my cabin. He thanked me for exposing the crime, then made an offer. Mr. Harper, we'd like to purchase a portion of the lake for restoration and community access, with you overseeing the project. I thought about it for a long moment. The same people who mocked me now wanted me to rebuild what they destroyed. Finally, I said, I'll help, but not for them. For the land. He nodded. Fair enough. Linda's trial dragged on for 6 months. When the verdict came, I sat quietly in the back row. The judge read the sentence. 5 years imprisonment and mandatory restitution for environmental damages. She didn't look back at me when they took her away. But I could see her reflection in the courtroom window, pale, defeated, and finally silent. Outside, reporters asked how I felt. I just said, justice is clear water. You can see right through it. Months passed. The county repaired the pipes, cleaned the lake bed, replanted native vegetation. The frogs returned first and then the fish. Every morning I'd cast my line at sunrise. The water rippled clean, calm, and alive again. Sometimes neighbors came by, not to complain but to thank me. Kids waved from bikes on the trail. Even the air felt lighter. When the project finished, they asked if I wanted to name the lake after myself. I declined. Instead, I built a small wooden sign by the dock. It read, Harper's Promise and Keep the Water Honest. The lake looked almost like it used to. Sunlight rippled across the surface, dragonflies hovered above cattails, and somewhere deep below, life was slowly returning. It had been a year since the trial. The signs of poison were gone, but the memories lingered, sharp, heavy, impossible to forget. I sat at the dock, lying in the water, coffee steaming beside me. For the first time in a long while, I wasn't waiting for something bad to happen. I was just waiting for the fish. They tore down the HOA office months ago. Now the lot stood, empty, fenced off with bright orange signs that read condemned. The rest of the neighborhood changed too. Without Linda's rules, people started repainting their homes, planting gardens, even hosting barbecues by the lake. No more violation notices. No more threats. The irony? The community finally started to look beautiful, not because of the HOA, but because it was finally free. But freedom comes with its ghosts. Sometimes at night, when the moonlight hit the still water, I'd see the faint reflection of those old barrels, as if the lake still remembered. And maybe it did. It was late afternoon when I saw the black sedan creeping down the gravel road toward my cabin. At first, I thought it was another reporter. But when the door opened, I froze. It was Ellen McCarthy, Linda's daughter. She looked nervous, clutching a folder against her chest. "Mr. Harper," she said softly, "can I talk to you?" I nodded, motioning her to sit on the porch. "I don't want trouble," she said. "I just wanted to say I'm sorry for what my mother did, for everything." Her eyes were honest, the same gray as Linda's, but without the arrogance. She slid the folder toward me. "She asked me to give you this before she was transferred." I hesitated, then opened it. Inside were handwritten letters, some signed, some half-finished. Apologies, explanations, confessions, and one photograph, a much younger Linda standing beside the same lake long before I bought the land. "She told me once this lake used to be her father's favorite place," Ellen whispered. "She said when the HOA took over she wanted to protect it, but somewhere along the way, she lost sight of that." I stayed quiet, because anger was easy, forgiveness wasn't. When she left, I stood by the water for a long time, holding that photograph. Linda smiling, before the greed, before the power. The wind picked up, scattering ripples across the surface. Maybe some people don't start out as villains. Maybe they just forget where the line is. Weeks later, I received a call from the county commissioner again. They wanted to officially reopen the lake as a public nature reserve, under my supervision. They'd name it after the promise sign I'd built, Harper's Promise Lake. It would mean more people, more fishing, more life. Exactly what I'd wanted all along. I agreed, on one condition: no HOA ever again. He laughed. Deal. By summer, Willow Creek had changed completely. Kids laughed along the shoreline. Boats drifted lazily in the distance. Even the air smelled sweeter. At the opening ceremony, Sarah stood beside me on the dock, grinning. "You realize you're basically a local legend now, right?" "Legend?" I smirked. "I just wanted to fish." She laughed. "Well, your little fishing hole sparked a federal case, exposed corruption, and got half the state talking about environmental reform. Not bad for a hobby." I smiled quietly. Guess the fish were worth it. Later that evening, when the crowd cleared out, I walked to the water's edge. In my hand was one of Linda's letters, the last one she'd written before her sentence began. I thought control was the same as protection. I thought rules kept people safe. I didn't realize I'd become the thing I was trying to stop. "If the lake ever heals, tell it I'm sorry." I folded the letter and placed it inside a small glass jar. Then, with a slow breath, I tossed it into the lake. The ripples spread wide, fading into silence. Maybe forgiveness wasn't about forgetting. Maybe it was about letting the water take what you couldn't carry anymore. A few days later, the EPA team visited one last time to collect final readings. Tom, the same agent who'd helped me from the start, handed me the report. He smiled. "Clean as mountain air, Harper, you did it." I looked out over the shimmering lake. "No," I said. "We did it." He nodded, then added quietly, "Funny thing, isn't it? You spent months fighting them for this water. And in the end, it's what saved everyone." I watched the sunlight flicker off the surface, golden and calm. "Water always finds balance," I said, "even when people don't." That evening, I went back to my dock, alone. The world had moved on, but the lake and I still had unfinished business. I tied on my old lure, the same one I'd used the day before the poisoning began. The air was cool, the sky painted in orange and violet streaks. I cast the line. The lure splashed softly, sending ripples through water that was finally alive again. Minutes passed. Then, a tug. Strong, steady, real. I reeled it in slowly, feeling the line vibrate with life. When the fish broke the surface, I smiled. It wasn't just a catch. It was a sign. The lake had forgiven me too. Months later, a local journalist asked to write a story about what happened. She titled it, "The Man Who Fought the HOA and Saved a Town's Water." But I told her that wasn't the real story. The real story was about respect, for land, for life, for balance, You don't own nature. You live with it. Protect it, or it will remind you who's really in charge. Sometimes harshly, sometimes mercifully. I still fish every morning. Not to catch, just to remember. The wind carries the scent of pine, the water glimmers clear, and every ripple feels like a promise kept. I reel in the line, smile faintly, and whisper the same words I carved into the dock. Keep the water honest,